Good afternoon, everyone. It's so exciting to join you today. I don't know if you've heard, but we've had a lot of excitement in the last few weeks. So I'm happy to share some of it with you today. We are going to have a little bit of a tour through some of the brand new features that we have on our sewing and embroidery machine. And the most extraordinary thing is that a lot of these are things that have never existed in the world before. Things like voice control and artificial intelligence. Who would have ever thought we would have these on our own sewing machine? And I'm going to kind of show you a little bit about what they are and what they do and give you an idea of how they work. And, like the interesting thing about when we come out with brand new features like this on a top of the line sewing machine, often a lot of these features filter their way down into our midline and even sometimes lower line sewing machines. Like I remember the last time that happened with PFAFF, one of the first machines that had the automatic lift. When you stop with the needle down, that the foot would automatically lift up. Well, first of all, it started at the top of the line machine, but then you saw that feature coming down into other machines, which made it really, really exciting. But it also kind of gives you an idea of how these things can be seen in the future with a lot of different machines. So who knows what's going to happen, right? We're going to start and talk a little bit about, I can see people joining, and thank you for spending a few minutes of your day with me. I think you're going to find it pretty fascinating. And whether you have the creative icon too or not, it just is just amazing where we are going and what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to start in sewing, and we're going to talk about what is changed for us in sewing. Now, artificial intelligence is really something that means that we're going to get some help and support. And as time goes on, more information will come. I hope you don't mind. My camera's got a little bit mixed up today. I put a better camera on the machine because I really want you to see this. So we're going to switch over and we're going to look at our, wait a second, this one here, our screen. And this is the screen of the creative icon too. And I'll zoom in a little bit if we need it. But one of the things when we're talking about artificial intelligence, what they're talking about right now, I have the zipper foot on, if you'll see the zipper foot. And when I put the zipper foot on, it tells me that I have the zipper foot for IDT on, and it's on the right side. What's fascinating about this is, think of how helpful that is. Because I know a lot of people that when they put the zipper foot on, they put it on wrong. So this is the way the zipper foot goes on. The prongs go on the back, and that's for the IDT. And then the flat part in front, that's the front of the zipper. Watch what happens if I put the zipper on backwards. I'm going to have to lift up my IDT to do it. And right away, I get a message on my machine that tells me I don't have the foot attached correctly. So this is the kind of feature when they're talking about when they're talking about artificial intelligence. What they mean is that there is now a camera that's in our machine, our Creative Icon 2, and it will let us know if we're using a foot incorrectly, or in the future, as we go on, you can only imagine where that might go, right? If we put a 1/4 of an inch foot on and we choose a zigzag, it will let us know that it's not the recommended foot right now with artificial intelligence. But in the future, you can kind of imagine that it will probably be able to tell us that we should not use that foot. And so it's helping us learn. Now, I was in a class recently where I asked everybody to put on the 2A foot. And a lot of these people were PFAFF owners, and they weren't sure what the 2A foot is. So to be able to put a foot on and know that it's being, you're going to get a message if it's not correct, or that if you're putting the foot on wrong, is really pretty extraordinary. So artificial intelligence is something that's only beneficial to us. And the more that we use it, the more that our machines will learn and be able to give us advice and help us to use the machine and the foot and all of the features that are in our machine correctly, so we don't make mistakes. So I love artificial intelligence, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see how that helps us as we sew. Now, we do have a new menu of stitches. You will find that in menu 3.4. And this is an example of some of the stitches. And I've stitched them out Aren't they beautiful? And the reason I was able to stitch these so beautifully straight is because we now have a built-in projector that can give us grid lines and also stitch lines so that we can sew straight. And I think I'm going to show you that next, because that's fascinating to see how much easier it makes our sewing. Imagine if you were doing cross hatching, to be able to have the grid, and you can set the grid anywhere from, I don't know what the minimum, it might even be 1 millimeter up to 30 millimeters. So the grid can go quite wide. So we're going to switch back over there, and I'm going to show you how we turn it on. All right. And when we are on our main screen, if we wanted to turn the grid on, over here at the top right-hand side, you'll see that's the projector button. You'll also see that button on our main machine, so it can be turned on either way. I'm going to take my zipper foot off, and we'll come back over here to the screen, and let's turn the projector on. So when I turn the projector on, right now, anything that's orange is off. So right now the projector's off, and I'm going to turn down the machine light a little bit to make it a little bit easier. I think you'll get a bit visibility when I turn that on. And you'll see some options. I can make the light brighter of the projection. And usually in sewing, you're going to leave the background color off. And if you wanted to put it on, then you could go over and change it. But that's a feature that's usually used in embroidery. My stitch preview, I'm going to leave that off for now. And I'm going to close that little window up. And what I'm going to do is just go and turn on the grid. So when I turn on the grid, it's coming up at 10 millimeters. And it's coming up in a green. And you can see that on my screen right here. But I'm going to change the color a little bit brighter so you can see it better on the camera. I'm going to choose white. And now look at the screen. Look at how bright that grid is. And then I'll just to show you the difference. And you notice if you touch in the middle of those boxes, it opens up a little calculator for you can just type it in, or you can use the plus and do it little by little. So now look at how big the grid is. That's pretty easy, isn't it? So the nice thing is, when you're working with something like this, say I'm going to just show you, I'm going to come over here and put my foot on. Let me put on my OA foot. And we're going to engage my IDT. And I've got a little sandwich, a little quilt sandwich in here for you to be able to see. And the one thing I didn't anticipate was being able to put my foot on the pedal. So there's my grid. If I was going to sew and I wanted the grid, let me change. I'll put it over onto this camera here so you can see that better. All right. So if you wanted to see and you wanted to sew a grid on your fabric, I'm going to come in here a little bit closer. I think you can all see that pretty cool. I've actually done this with cross hatching, and it really works incredibly well because you can sew one layer of stitching after another, and you can always, I've got the edge of my grid along the edge of my fabric. Whoops, I'm sorry, I forgot to thread my machine. Let's see if we can do that quickly. Sorry for my fingers. There we go. And I always like to have my thread underneath my foot and to the back when I start. So when I'm going to start sewing, what's different about this is instead of watching where the needle's sewing, I'm watching where the grid is sewing. Now, if I wanted to stop and turn around and go the other way, I can sew, and I'm going to be looking at the grid lines to make sure they're straight on my line. And that way I know that I have turned at exactly a 90-degree angle. Isn't that amazing? Now, when I start sewing here, the first time when I do this, I'm a little bit cautious. I want to make sure that my grid, so I have to go one more stitch. You'll notice the grid is not exactly on there. So I'm going to go and take one more stitch, just tap my, all right. And now when I come back, now the grid is on that line. And so this allows me to do really, really quick quilting. So I can do row after row, and then I can come back the other way and do my cross hatching going in the opposite direction. So what do you think of that? Isn't that amazing that we can do that? All right. Now let me see. I've got a question here. Will the AI tell you if you have the single hole plate on and, well, okay, and want a zigzag? So right now, that's a really good question. Right now, we don't need the AI to tell us that we've got the straight stitch plate on. If we have many of our machines, the ones that come with a straight stitch plate, which would be like the Creative Icon, the Performance Icon, and I may be wrong, but I think the 720 comes with the same plate. If you have the straight stitch plate on, you will not be able to select anything other than a zigzag. It already protects you. The difference is if you were to go and put a 1/4 of an inch foot on right now, it won't protect you, right? If you were using the zigzag plate and you put on the 1/4 of an inch foot, the 1/4 of an inch foot's got a hole just in the center. So right now, it will tell you it's not the recommended foot, but it won't actually stop you from doing it. But I expect, and I fully do expect in the future, the way that we are developing artificial intelligence, that those are the kinds of directions they're going to go. Just don't hold me to it to how fast it's going to happen. But I really expect that that will happen in the future. So be patient because there's so much exciting things that are coming. So, all right. And then we have a question about changing the grid size. Yes, let me go back and I'll show you how you can change the grid size. All right. Now, on our screen where we have the grid, it asks you for the size. So if I wanted to, let me say I wanted to do a grid for a 9mm stitch. So I'm going to make this grid 10 millimeters. All right. And now when I go over to my other camera, you'll see the grid has gotten much smaller. Let me just cut this. Now the advantage of this is maybe I wanted to do a decorative stitch. Right? I could put, look at that. What a coincidence. I had the other was 30 millimeters, right? And now when I have my grid at 10 millimeters, it will actually put a grid line on the left of my stitching and on the right of my stitching. And just before you criticize my stitching, I just want you to know I'm standing up and trying to sew without having a chair or anything here. So it's not perfect, but I think it's pretty darn good. Now, let's go and we're going to do something else. We're going to turn on our stitch projection. So the stitch projection is another option that we have. And when I choose a decorative stitch, I'm going to turn the stitch projection on. And the color is going to be, let's choose a color. We'll choose white, I guess, or let's make it green. I'm not sure. I'll argue with myself and see what it shows up like. Now, what I want to do is change the stitch that I'm using. I'm going to go into menu 4 and menu 4.2, and I'm going to choose the stitch here. Now, if I switch back over to my fabric, what you're seeing now is the stitch that I selected. The stitch is centered. All right, I'm going to bring this over here to this line here. It's centered on the grid line. Now, if I wanted to put that stitch in the center of those two lines that I stitched, I can move the grid because that would be much more effective, right? So let me move the grid, all right? Because right now, the stitch and the center line of the grid is lined up down the center. I want the grid to go on either side of that stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change back to my screen and I'm going to go back to my projector, and where the grid is, I can move the position left or right. So I'm going to move it to the right. And as I do that, I'll put the other screen on so you can see what's happening. So as I'm moving the grid, you'll notice now the line's not in the center And I can put that on either side of that stitch. How cool is that? So now, when I start to sew, if I wanted to have that stitch centered in those two lines, I have a grid line that I can see here. I have a grid line over here. And then I have a grid line that is where the stitch is centered. And I think I might need to go one more. Let me see, I'll make sure. Yeah, I think that's better. There we go. So now when I sew that decorative stitch, I will not be looking at the needle, and I won't be looking at these two grid lines. I'm going to be looking at the grid line that's over to the left and the grid line that's over to the right. Isn't that amazing? Just think about all the possibilities when it comes to sewing straight. Now, this was something I was working on yesterday, and look at how beautiful those decorative stitches are. I have never sewn so straight in my life, and that's all because of those grids. You can set the grids anywhere, and I'll check, but I'm sure it's like 0.1 to 30 millimeters, so they can go quite far apart. And if you have a stitch that's 9 millimeters, or like right now, that stitch that I've selected, I think is 9 millimeters. I have the grid set to 10. So it means there'll be one line on the left, one line on the right, and it's just a tiny bit wider than the stitch so that I don't see it on the stitch. I've done the same thing when I'm doing on maxi stitches, and the stitches are very, very wide. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And sometimes any stitch that's wider than 9 millimeters, you know that the fabric is going to move left and right. And so this really helps to keep you on track. But when I look at this grid, here's an example of a bag that I made. And look at the decorative stitches here that I've done right here that are all the rows. That is just gorgeous. And the nicest thing about it is I didn't have to mark up all my fabric. I didn't have to spend time drawing lines. And once I got the first straight line, then everything else was perfectly straight next to that. So that's pretty incredible. Now there's a whole bunch of other things you can do. I'm going to turn the grid off for a moment, and then we're going to think about what else do we have there with the options with projector, because we have stitch guidelines. So sometimes the grid is really helpful, but sometimes you may not want all those lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off. Let's see, I'm going to come over here, and I cut up 2 pieces. And let me just lift that up here. I'm going to put that away. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the stitch preview off for a moment, and I'm going to turn the grid off. And once you've done that, you can close those windows up by just touching those little arrows. And then that makes more room for everything else. Down here, I have the Stitch Guide 1 and Stitch Guide 2. Now, any of these ones that are black mean they're not on. When something is orange, that means it's on. I'm going to turn on Stitch Guide 1. And then the length of this is 100 millimeters, and that's from corner to corner. The width has to do with the thickness of the line. So right now, if I put some fabric underneath here, what I'm getting is a line that's right in the center of my foot. And that may be valuable to me, but maybe I want to move that line to the left edge or right edge of the foot. And I can do that. I can reposition it anywhere I want to by moving the horizontal position. All right. And I can take it off the center. And I'll show you afterwards what you can do. But you can also change the angle. Maybe if you wanted to have that be at a 45-degree angle, I have an option, or a 90-degree angle. If I put 45, you'll see the angle, and look at that angle. Now, the other wonderful thing about the stitch guides is you can make the lines thicker so that you can really see them very strongly. Now, that is Stitch Guide 1 that I've done. And we have another one, which is Stitch Guide 2. And I'll just turn that on so you can see what that looks like. All right. So Stitch Guide 2, right now it's at another 45-degree angle. I'm going to change that to 0. And now that is the line that's in the center of my foot. So you have all the options in the world. I'm going to change that back to 0. So now I have 2 lines. The wonderful thing about this is you can make up your own mind how you want to use this. When you're doing stitching, like if anybody has ever done bias binding, when you're trying to cut, you know, when you have 2 pieces of bias binding and you need to sew them together, and the way you sew these together, you have to flip them. Wait a second here. I got to do them like this. All right. Wait a second, like this. Excuse my chest. All right. So you have to have a little triangle hanging out of the top and the bottom, and your needle has to go through that intersection. This is absolutely brilliant how you can use these stitch guidelines, because what you want is the line to go through the center of the foot, and I'll show you how it works. And then the other line can be out at that 1/4 inch seam allowance to make it easier for you to sew straight. And then once you come down to the other end, when you're getting to this other triangle, you're watching that laser to make sure that your needle is passing directly through that center. I have done yards and yards and yards, probably hundreds of yards of binding, bias binding, straight on the grain binding. And that is always my biggest challenge, no matter how good a sewer I am, to be able to get that to open up and be one perfectly straight fabric. It is a whole new ball game now. When you go to do your binding and you want to put this together, this is amazing. So let me go over and I'm going to show you that. And in the meantime, I do have a question. One of the questions is, what stabilizer to use for these stitches? So the decorative stitches, I'm usually using a tearaway, because afterwards you can pull them away. When I was doing the stitches on here, and aren't they gorgeous? Look at them. They just glow. And that's on like an upholstery vinyl of velvet, but you can do them on any fabric you want to. They're called hand look stitches because they've got a very heavy, heavy, rich look to them. The way that I did these, I had a fusible fleece underneath it, and then you could put a tearaway stabilizer underneath here. When I was doing these stitches, I did have a tearaway, and then you'll notice on the back that I tore away the big pieces, and all I've got left is a little bit behind the stitches. And usually I don't mind leaving those stitches there. But isn't that incredible? Look at how straight those lines are. It's just unbelievable that we can sew that straight in sewing. And you all know me. I always say, if I want to sew straight, I'm going to bring my stitches into embroidery, because then I don't have to worry about it. But now I can't say that anymore, because I can sew as straight as an arrow. I guess an arrow is a good comparison. All right, I'm going to go over with my 2 pieces of bias and show you how this can work using the 2 grid lines that I've pulled up. There we go. So when you're doing this, all right, usually you use the 1/4 inch foot. And I cannot say that I have a 1/4 inch foot with me right now. I don't think I pulled it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay, a second here. I'm going to lay my first piece down. All right. And the way you do this, if you're not sure how to do this for your binding, is they should be both at a 45-degree angle, right? There's one piece and there's the other. And then you take the top piece and then you put it down, and there should be a triangle on the bottom. And next, see that extra piece of triangle that's hanging down there? And then at the other end, there should be a triangle. They should not line up point to point. If you put these point to point, you will have a piece that looks like this, and it will be very wrong. So you need to make sure that you have that extra hanging off. That's your seam allowance. So when you're doing this, for any quilters or anybody that's a garment sewer that's made binding, your goal is to have the needle pass through that center, that intersection where that diamond is. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit for you. Okay. So you see where that intersection is? You line up the outside edge of the 2 pieces. And then where that laser is going is going to be right at the intersection of, and it looks like a right angle there, and it is a right angle. And then your needle is going to go down at that point. So I usually like to put my needle down All right, and I got to go and change my stitch. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to put a straight stitch on. And actually, let me move my camera over to the other one so you can kind of see that. I'm going to go to my straight stitch, utility stitches. And now my needle is not my grid. If you look at the grid, it's not on the edge of my fabric because I do not have the 1/4 of an inch foot on. But in this technique, we can use it and we can move our needle right here where it says position. And don't you love all those words? Now all the icons are labeled. So if you wanted to know what this is on a straight stitch, that is position. And when you move plus or minus, it'll move the position of it. This is your stitch length and there's your tension. Down below, all the icons are labeled too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this over. My needle is moving over to the right. All right. And now I'll come back over. All right. So when I'm doing this, let me just pull up my. All right. So there's my needle in the center. When I have my needle set in the down position, that needle, that laser is supposed to go right through that intersection. All right. And you'll notice that other laser is not on my seam allowance. Now, the nice thing about doing this is you don't have to do exactly a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You can do more than a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance when you're doing this. And since I have a wider foot, if I wanted to line that up, that second grid line, so it was on the edge of my fabric, I can move my needle over because we have 37 needle positions, right? Whoops, wait a second here. Hold on 1 second here. But what am I doing is I want to move not the needle, I want to move the laser. So which laser is the red one? Let's see. This one here. And when it comes to position, I'm going to move it over. There we go. So it's at the edge of my fabric. And you have a lot of leeway to do that. So when I start sewing, my goal is just to start at the center, all right, where that intersection is. And then as I come down the other end, my goal is to make sure that my needle is passing through the other end. All right, so as I'm coming, you see how that laser is pointing right there to the other end? So you could make sure that every time you do something like this, look at how easy that is. I'll come back over and show you. Whoops. So there we are. Look at that. Now I have a perfectly straight piece of fabric. That is just amazing. Look at how easy that is. I like to go and press my seams open, but they're not as strong that way. A lot of people, what they like to do is they'll press their seams to one side and it's much stronger. So I just find it's less bulky. So I usually split the seam, but that's not what they recommend. So do whichever option you like. You know, the more experience you have, the more choices you can make. Now let's see. Should the stitch guide 1 be centered on your foot when doing the straight stitch? Yes. If that's what you want. Stitch guide 1 could be on the edge of your foot. And that will mean that as you're sewing lines, you can do that and you'll get parallel lines. You could also use the 2 of them, right? You could put 1 stitch guide to the left of the foot, 1 stitch guide to the right of the foot. There's no right or wrong here. It's all about how you want to use the machine. That's the most exciting thing about it is those stitch guides are so, let me come back and I'll show you how that would work. All right. I've got my fabric in there. All right. And say I wanted to do a row of decorative stitching and I wanted it to be, let me guess right here. So there is my last stitching that I did, right? And I want to do another row of stitching that is parallel to the last row of stitching I did. So we've got 2 of the stitch guides. The red one is over here and it's not quite to the edge of the foot. So let me just touch that. All right. See how I can move it over so it's on the outside edge of my foot. And now, and I'll come back over to the other screen so you can see what I'm doing here. Now that's stitch guide 1 I've moved. Stitch guide 2, we want to move it to the left. So the horizontal position, you're just going to shift that over. And now that you know what I'm doing, watch how I'm going over. So now it's going over, and you can kind of just keep going. Now, if you know where you want to make it, you could just type it in and it's quicker. But this way you can get it exactly where you want it to be. There we go, right on that line. Now, the nice thing is you can, again, remember I said the stitch guides, you can make them brighter. Look at how cool that is. Imagine how easy it's going to be to sew straight when you have a stitch line that you can follow. Every row of stitching you do is going to be absolutely perfectly straight. That is phenomenal. We have never been able to sew like that before. Let's stop and see if there's anybody got any questions before I go too far. Anybody got any questions? If not, I got a lot more to show you. We're halfway. We're going to move to embroidery, and we're going to talk about how the projector works in embroidery and how the camera works. Now, remember when I said the camera was the artificial intelligence that was allowing our machines to see what foot we have on. The creative icon 2 knows what foot we have on. Right now, it's only the feet that come with the machine, but in the next while, over time, it'll be all of our feet. And these are not special feet. There's nothing special about these feet. These are the same traditional feet that you would find on your creative icon or any of the previous machines. And it's just that we have that camera that will start to recognize what those feet are. In embroidery, the camera does something different. Same thing with the projector. In projector, we have the grid, we have the stitch guidelines, and then we have way more we can do in embroidery. So let's move to embroidery, and I want to show you some of those things because it is, honestly, I think in the beginning when we knew the creative icon 2 was coming out, we were like, it's going to be great to have all these things. But it's one thing to know that they're coming and another thing to use them. And that's where the excitement comes in. So if you've ever been frustrated by sewing straight, I totally believe you are going to love the creative icon 2. The other thing I've noticed, don't tell anybody, it's quieter. It sews quieter. It is just a beautiful machine to stitch on. They have thought of everything and they've listened to everything you've said. So keep that in mind when you sit and you're in the store, and if you go in and you sit and see what is all about, if you don't have it yet, you would be shocked at it. There's quite a bit of a difference in how quiet the creative icon 2 is compared to our previous machines. So, but don't tell anybody I told you. Okay. All right. Now, we're going to go to embroidery. So I'm going back to my screen, not that one, this one here. All right. And I'm going to turn the projector off, and you'll notice there's a new home button up here, right? So that is my home button. It will take me to sewing, embroidery, or my Sewnet. If I wanted to go and see the blog, that's where my blog is. And there's 2 different ways of seeing them. You can see them like this, or you can go to the other option, and now you see more of them, but there's less information about them. So one is kind of a list view, and one of them is one that's got more of them on the screen. But I want to go to embroidery, and I'll clear my ongoing work. Everything is much easier. Do you notice how all the words were nice and big and bright and in English? Well, that's kind of the way everything is. And as we get into different languages, it's going to be the same thing. Now, what we're going to do is I want to turn on the projector. All right. Now, right now, that doesn't do it. I'm just going to close that up there. I'm going to bring in a design. All right. And it's going to be this little flower design here. If I wanted to, apparently I didn't load it. Touch. Now, if you tap twice, now it'll load the design right away. Wasn't that easy? They've really thought of everything. They know that, sometimes people have challenges, so they've really thought of ways. If you go into load a design and you tap it twice, it'll load it. Now, the hoop we're going to do this in is going to be the 100 by 100 metal hoop. So I'm going to choose my hoop options, and I'm going to go to the 100 by 100 metal hoop. All right. And I have some fabric that I put in there. And I'll just move over here. Now, when I turn the projector on, in embroidery, turn it on, it does something very different. You'll notice that it pulled the embroidery arm in. In all of our previous machines, when we were going to embroidery, we would go to embroidery stitch out, and then we would put our hoop on in the creative icon. The machines before that were a little different. But now, if we're going to the projector or we're doing scanning, it will pull the arm in at this point so that we can attach it. So I'm just going to put it on, click it into place, and now we're going to come back and see. So I've attached the hoop, and it's the right hoop. And now I'm going to go, oh, look what happened. There's a bright light that's there. But first, we're going to go and load a design. So we have our brightness on here. I don't need to do anything with that. But this design that we have, let's see if I change the colors. I'm going to just go up here. Wait a second. I'm not going to load a second design. I'm going to change the colors. So with the painter's palette there, and I could select that purple. And we have ability to change the color. Look at everything is marked in English. You never have to guess what those icons are. From now on, you know exactly where they are. And then we also have this little color wheel, which is really very, very cool. So you can make the color brighter over here with this one scan bar, and you'll notice in the center what the color looks like. And then if you want to make it like grayer, more tertiary color, this one will make it more of a brown color. Or if you want it bright, you can bring it up like that. Now, there's one other extraordinary thing that's in here. Whoopsie daisy. I don't have, oh yes, I do. I just thought I might not have changed the screen over. What do you think this is right here? Right now, if I touch that, it will bring up all the thread colors of Robus and Anton. And for those of you that like to use other color palettes from other different manufacturers, you're probably saying, well, what good is that? Because I don't use Robus and Anton. Well, this is where the extraordinary thing comes in. All of the thread manufacturers that exist in this world today are on here. Look at that. Isn't that incredible? You've got every manufacturer that you can imagine and want to embroider on. I haven't counted them, but there's definitely way over 100. And so you can go to any manufacturer you want. If it's metallic thread, they have it there as a metallic. And whatever thread manufacturer you like, you can choose. Now, the other thing you can do, like say I want to choose Mettler Rayon 40. There it'll bring me all the thread colors. But if I know the number, I can just go there and type it. And I'm not going to do that, but I just want you to have the idea of how amazing that is. Let me just uncheck this color here. And I think, wait a second here. We're just going to close that down. Oh, I know. You see what I'm doing? I have to touch OK, so I acknowledge that the color is there. And now I'm going to uncheck that, and we have a new color for our design. Now, here's what's really amazing about the projector. In embroidery, when you are doing embroidery, and I go to my hoop, I see that design on my screen, so I know exactly where I'm going to put it. You see that, how I can move the design? If it's too big for my space, maybe I want it over in this corner. I can put it wherever I want to, and I can see the size that's going to be in the area. So this is the true size, right? So I might decide I want to shrink this down a little bit. So before I go into embroidery stitch out, I know exactly where that design is going to be and how bright it's going to be. Tell me that's not amazing. That is just fabulous. And if you can see, I'm going to come in here like this. The camera doesn't show it as well. And that's just because of the amount of light that's there. But look at that. Isn't that just beautiful to see that design that is projected onto your fabric? Now, if you wanted the design to be somewhere at the back of the fabric, you see this light screen here? Well, that can move. I can change that. And I'll just move it a little bit. Hold on a second here. All right, so I've moved that light up, and now I can see what that's going to look like, and I can drag that design where I want it to be too. Oops, sorry about that. All right, see that? So you can kind of control where the light box is and where you move the design. Maybe I had a square of fabric here that was a quilt block, and I wanted that flower to go right in the center of that block. I can decide to move it exactly where I want it to be. and then I will see that. Anybody have any questions about that? I mean, these are really amazingly exciting things that we can do. Now, that was the projector. It can project an embroidery design on the screen. We also have the ability to scan our fabric. So I've got a couple of different options, and I'll show you just so you can kind of see. Now, the idea of scanning is so that instead of us projecting the design onto the screen, we can scan the fabric first, and then we will see the fabric on the back of our screen. So let me show you how that's done, because this is just as simple. None of these things are hard. Everything is much, much easier than you think it is. So I'm going to go over to the other screen. Whoops, wrong one. Always do that. Sorry about that. All right. And now I'm going to turn the projector off for right now, so I don't see the light on the screen. And now I'm going to go to the projector to scan it. So if I go down to hoop options, you'll see some new options in here. The first one up here says start hoop scan. So I'm going to choose start hoop scan. It says remove the press to foot for best result. It's also a good idea to take the thread out of the needle so you don't see the thread, because what it's going to do is it's going to take pictures of the fabric that's in your hoop. Now, and you notice I did this with the metal hoop, right? I bet you probably thought you couldn't do this with metal hoops, but this works with all of our hoops. So what I'm going to do is touch OK, and then you'll see it going and moving in different directions, and it's kind of taking pictures of the fabric in the hoop. Now, when we get back, we've got our background color right now is selected. That was that white. I'm going to choose scanned hoop. I think in the future, probably we won't even have to do this. It'll automatically do it. But for now, that's what we do. And then when you touch hoop options, you will see the fabric in the hoop. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? And there's the fabric. So now I can go and put the design exactly where I want it to be. And then if I wanted to use a combination of both, I could turn the projector on. Okay, I'm going to put it on. And now when I come over, I can decide where I want that design to be because I can see it. So not only is the fabric, and I'll after I do this, I'll turn it off, and I'm going to come back over here. And you can see the design is below the bird over here, and it's to the left of the bird. And then let me put it on this camera and look and see how cool that is. Wait a second. Let me get it in the right place. See the green bird and the orange bird? It's right exactly in the same place where I put it. Now, that's a pretty big wow. We have never, ever been able to do anything like that before. Some of the other things, though, these are physical things that make it easier for us to sew and to embroider. We also still have Stitch Creator, right? Sometimes we might want to do that too. Precise positioning. But now we don't need to do it as much because all of these things are much quicker and just as accurate. The only time I really think when you're doing something like a quilt design where it's maybe an end-to-end design and it stops at one needle in one position and you need to line it up to an exact stitch, those are the kind of things you're still going to use precise positioning for. All right, so there's a question. Do you know if they're going to remove the demo mode from the machine? It doesn't make sense to have this unless it's a dealer machine. I don't agree with you at all, but I'll tell you why. And let me go and look at, I'm going to show them what you're talking about. All right. And the demo mode on our screen. I got to bring this over. All right. So if I'm back here and I want to go to demo mode, it's the option at the bottom. All right. And these are all videos. Now you can play them all. It acts like kind of like a screensaver, but I was watching something today. What was I watching? I'm trying to remember now. Let's go and talk about AI. So here it's just going through a little video and it kind of shows you and it tells you in words, right, what to do. And it's saying, everything that you need to do right now. The machine will alert you. So if you don't know how to use that, then it kind of gives you an idea. Now, the AI that is built in there, that is something you can turn off. But if I want to just go back, I can turn this off. All right. And I can get out of demo mode. What I think some of those things are, and just so that everybody knows, I'm going to go, wait a second, I didn't mean to go there. I'm going to go to, I want to go back to sewing, or let's go back to embroidery. I'm going to go to embroidery. All right. Now, if I go to settings, all right, in my machine settings, in the camera, wait a second. If I go to the camera, if I wanted to turn that foot recognition off because I didn't feel I needed it, you can uncheck it. And so I expect in the future, there will be something like that you can turn the demo mode off if you don't want to. But while you're watching it, and I'm going to go back here. All right. If you come back, the demo mode is just this little button down here at the bottom. And if you don't like it, you certainly can ignore it. But one day I'm sure they'll take it off or have it as an option. You can put it on or off. But quite honestly, I found some of these things very fascinating, like the accessories. This is a little video that's in there showing you how to put the creative embellishment on. So it's like a little free demo of how to use all of our different accessories. And I think that's something that's actually going to be beneficial for a lot of people to use. So I think it will become, instead of necessarily something just for the dealer to use, it will be something that will help you learn how to use some of these projects and products. There it's talking about the foot, how you kind of operate the foot so that you can see how to use the multi-purpose foot control. So I have it run right now on just a continuous loop that I can choose when I want to turn it on and off. And while I'm doing other things, I find myself watching it and I find it really helpful. So I look at those videos as just a way of me reminding myself how things work. And I found them very interesting. But I know that people have asked that it can be turned off. So I expect at some point that they will add that feature on there. Almost always, they try and be as responsive as possible. And so if you're looking for something like that, you can always send a suggestion in, and they really do listen. And I know they've got a ton of more exciting things coming, and I know they're working on them right now. So I want them to do those things first. So maybe after they get all those other exciting things coming, then we will use that. Now, I did use, somebody asked a question about the stabilizer. I didn't use the magnets. That's because I had no intention of stitching it out. I did use the sticky stabilizer, but I also would always use the magnets, right? I didn't want them to kind of get in your way of seeing what you were seeing. So I just kept them off. But even if I'm using a sticky stabilizer, I always put magnets, at least 4 magnets on the 4 corners. It's not a good idea not to do that. You don't want the fabric to move. Even if you're using a sticky stabilizer, they can be really helpful. Okay. So I got a couple of other things to share with you. And if you've got any more questions, we've got 10 minutes left. I am going to just do a little quick thing of showing you some of the things that I did with the creative embellishment. And it is wonderful. It will be coming out in the next few months. I know some of the dealers have their main demo one in the store. And if you're curious, go into the store and they can show you how you can use it. But in the next few months, they'll be starting to be in the store. And by the way, did you know there's a new metal hoop? There is a brand new metal hoop. It is at 200 by 200 and it comes with 8 magnets. And so it works just like the other ones do. They are arriving in your dealer store. So make sure if you're interested in that you get on the list, because I'm telling you, the stores that I was in, as soon as they were coming in, they were going back out. So don't wait, because you know the way it is these days, sometimes it can get a little challenging keeping enough stock in the store. So if that is one of your favorite things, that you love metal hoops, you really want to get your hands on one of these 200 by 200 metal hoops. Right now, they're only working on the Creative Icon 2. Over time, they probably will put them onto the lower machines that can manage the 200 by 200 hoop, but I don't know how long that will be. And that's just because all of the engineers and all of the people in Sweden are working so hard to really bring us so many new features. And I don't want them to stop. So for now, they're going to be working on that, and then we'll see what happens. Now, the difference between a ribbon embroidery attachment and the creative embellishment attachment is actually quite a bit of difference. Instead, you have, instead of this large ring that goes around here, you'll see it's much, much lighter and it's much thinner. It doesn't come down as deep. And so that means if you have it on and you forgot to put your hoop underneath there, it will let you put your hoop on, even though you've got the creative embellishment attachment in place. Now, there is two different bases for it. This is a traditional base for the ribbon attachment. And you can see that they've just taken that part. And if you wanted to do that, the part that's on here now is for the yarn. And there's just a little button that you push down and it rotates off like this. The button's up over here and I just push it down and that comes off. And then when you go to put the new one on, there's two red dots. You line up the red dots that are down here at the bottom. I'll pull it up closer to you so you can kind of see it. Let me just get it in place. See the two red dots down at the bottom? And you line them up and then you just rotate it and now that one's in. Everything is super simple. And it is also very quiet. And the other thing I've noticed a few different things for those of you that might have gotten it early. When you pull up a yarn embroidery, yarn creative embellishment attachment, or the ribbon or anything else, it will automatically default, even though you've gone in and you've got a design that's got a lot of different stitching with it. And then maybe the last few colors are the beads, beads like this. And this is the way that they roll on. They just kind of come on like this. There is a little placement, a little seating area where you can put this in and put a twister and then you can roll it on like that. I usually do it the old-fashioned way, but whatever works for you. It does come with that, so it's not hard to do. And then all you're going to do when you're done, after you've rolled it, is you're going to put the beads in through that little bar there and then sit it in place, and then it gets locked into position like that. There are some fabulous videos about how to do all of this. And I know that Thomas and Ryan have put some links. If you look in the upper area, if you're interested in finding out more about voice control and how that works, or if you've got a creative icon too and you're just setting that up, make sure that you go into those links because they will bring you step-by-step instructions on how to do it. And there's a lot of help and support out there. There are videos for anybody that's just brought home a new creative icon too. Look in the paperwork. You'll see that there's a website where you can go on and get videos that are exclusive for you. Nobody else gets them. I didn't even get them. And they go through how to use all of these features and how to do a project. There's a project in there that you can do from start to finish. And Vanessa gave you all the instructions on how to do that. So a lot of fun ways of using your creative icon too. And I think this is the very first time I can honestly say we have given so many creative ways and videos and lots of support both to you and to your dealers. So I hope they use it. There's all kinds of exciting things coming out. There's a new block of the month that's coming out. There's lots of creative ways of making sure that you're getting the most out of your machine. Now, I'll show you a couple of things I did. For the beading, I have a couple of projects. I'll go back here and I'll pull one out so you can kind of see. This is a quilt that I did. Now, the fun thing about this quilt, this cross-hatching, I know this camera's not good. I did cross-hatching on the navy blue right here. And I didn't mark any lines. And it is just beautiful. It looks perfectly straight. So this butterfly is creative embellishment attachment. It uses beads, it uses yarn, and it also uses ribbon. So it's kind of a combination of different things. There's some fun designs that are going to be coming in the library. That this is one of them. And there's some different applique shapes. And this yarn is a very, very thin yarn. So the fun thing about using all of these, let me see if I can show you. This yarn, look at how thin this yarn is. It's like feather thin. And so First of all, it'll do the applique for your circles, and then you put the yarn in. And in our there's no way we would have caught yarn like that if we were using the yarn couching foot. This is just way too fine. But with the creative embellishment, you can use all different kinds of yarn. You can use chenilles. Here, down here in this butterfly, this is a chenille yarn, and I've never seen it. This is something else you cannot use in the yarn couching foot either, because the chenille is only got one fiber through the center of it, and it really can't catch it well. But the way the creative embellishment works, it was easy and beautiful. Now, the other thing, look and see what a fun way to use these floating stitches. You know that the Quilt Expression 720, Performance Icon, the Creative Icon, and the Creative Icon 2 all have these beautiful floating stitches. What a nice way to do something a little bit modern and different. So that's kind of a cool thing. Oh, I'm running out of time. Let's see what else I've got time for. Where did my sweater go to? Hold on. Oh, here it is. A couple things. Here's something I did with beads. All right. This was just a shirt where I'm playing around. So I've done all different kinds of beads and yarn. There's some beads. There's the blue beads. And as you look at them all, there's all different kinds of things in there. And then I even did try, the fringe yarn that's kind of like messy and it's got all the strings to it. That's that one that was done. And then I have another one over here with a different yarn. And then I've got this jacket that I worked on. And I might go a couple of minutes long, guys. This butterfly is the same butterfly, but done in a completely different way. And then I had this design that's done with yarn. And it's got a beautiful, beautiful look to it. I'm not sure if you can kind of see, but there's a texture to the yarn. It was actually a very flat yarn, but when it was done, it ended up full of texture. And then on the front of this jacket, there's some other, this is going to be, my goal is just to fill it all with all these beautiful embroidery designs. And who knows what it's going to look like in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. It does take time, but it is a lot of fun. Now, before we end up saying goodbye, did anybody have any questions? Here's my last one. I'm going to pull this back over here. I turn around. This is yarn that's done on the back of my velvet shirt. And with my original plan, I was going to put it down the whole lower here, but I ran out of yarn, so that's as far as I got. But it's really cute, kind of very, very different and interesting to look at. So one way or another, I hope that you're intrigued enough to think about checking out the Creative Icon 2. And you all know where to find me. On my Facebook page is Karen Loves to Quilt and Sew. As I'm putting new projects on, I'm going to start posting them there. I've been on the road since the convention, so I haven't had a time to do it. But this week and next, I'm going to start posting some of the projects that I've done. And if you've got any questions about something I didn't cover, you can always ask me them there, and I'll get right back to you. So if there's no more questions, just know that PFAFF has got absolutely the best of the best. We are the only company in the world that has voice recognition, voice control. We are the only company in the world that has artificial intelligence in a sewing machine, in an embroidery machine. These are first. We still have the best lighting in the industry. And there's all of these different things that now that we have the projector, the camera, and lots of different things. Even the thread. Imagine that we have all the thread manufacturers built in there. And that's because they put a stronger processor in there. So the screen, the screen has got so much more detail. It's not like the camera I'm on right now. It looks like a high quality computer. Then when you're looking at the screen and you're looking at those videos, it is like you're working on a very top of the line computer. It's not a sewing machine anymore, and it makes it so much nicer to be able to use it with all the words there in English or whatever language you want to do. Now, we didn't really talk about voice control. Right now, voice control is set up. It's in English and German. French is going to be coming soon, and as time goes on, more and more languages will come also. But that is something that we are the first and the only company in the world that has a sewing machine, embroidery machine, that has voice control. And it is a lot of fun when you can say you're at the ironing and you say, Alexa, Tell my creative icon to show me a video on how to sew zipper, and it will bring up the video and I can watch it and see how to put a zipper in. Or maybe I want it to move into embroidery, and then I can say, I want to see all the butterflies that are built into my creative icon too. And it'll say, and sometimes if you don't specify, it'll say, do you want to see the creative icon 2 butterflies in the machine or in the library? And if you say the library, it will take you to the library and bring those designs right to your machine, because you can do that now with a creative icon 2. So I hope you found this exciting. I hope you're curious enough to go and look and find out everything else. In this 1 hour, I didn't even have a fraction of time to tell you all the new things, but these are my favorite things. So I hope that you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you soon on another Facebook Live. Goodbye, everybody.